I'm so happy to be here. So I'm Katy. Nice to meet you. And my talk is Hocus Pocus, What Magicians Can Teach Virtual Reality. So this is a question that I've been looking at for the last sort of 6 months. The work that I've been doing is sponsored by Scenic, which is a live-action VR production company out of Brooklyn. They're awesome. So, as was mentioned, my background is in experience design, and I work in that intersection of storytelling, technology, and design. I'm so consumed by this question of how does the audience interpret stories now that they're at the center of them? And to follow that, I'm also really interested in how content creators can better communicate to an audience that's now at the center of the story. And last year, with the support of Stanford and the National Film Board of Canada, me and my friends did a series of prototype tests looking at that question. And this is one of them. This is where we controlled the focus and then looked at how that impacted the participants' interpretation of the story. But one of the things that we kept seeing while we were testing was this. You've probably seen it too. You know, when people put on the headset, they look wildly around the room. For some reason, they look at the floor a lot. We called it the detective. And people love being the detective. The unfortunate thing is that we found out they're really bad at being the detective. More often than not, they focus in on incongruencies or gaps in the story world, rather than focusing in on any kind of like key moment that will bring them deeper into the immersion. And we talked to VR content creators, and they said, yeah, it's a huge problem. You know, unlike cinema, we don't have a lot of ways to frame the action for the audience. So we need help with that. And I thought about that, and I was like, who is good at that? Who is good at directing our eye in space? And I thought, magicians. Magicians are awesome at taking people into 360 physical spaces and getting us to look at the smallest details, right? Like wooden bowls and cups, a rabbit coming out of a hat. And they're also awesome at getting us to or guiding our eye away from things that they're not ready to reveal to us or that they are worried will overwhelm us. So the best part of this research has been that I've gotten to talk to a lot of magicians. So I've had a lot of Skype calls that start out like this. So you can't hear the sound, but he said magic first. And this is Jeff McBride. He runs the Magic Mystery School in Las Vegas. I've had the honor of speaking to some really great magicians. We spoke to magicians from the Magic Castle in LA. Of course, Jeff McBride from the Magic Mystery School in Las Vegas. Magicians from the Monday Night Theater Magic in New York. And then Jim Steinmeier. And he's like a legend. He's sort of like the magician's magician. He designed the illusion that made the Statue of Liberty disappear. So I was really excited when I met these guys, and I was like, look, just tell me how it works. I'm not going to reveal your secrets. I'm going to use it for VR. We're all good. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. And actually, Katy, you're coming at us with a completely wrong question. And it's a question that we often get from new magicians. New magicians are like obsessed with the technical and the mechanics of the trick. And they said, if you go to a new magician's show, you'll see it'll be spectacle after spectacle. And the problem is, it's really boring. So their first tip to me was, the trick is not the trick. And then they pointed me towards the balloon and needle trick. So this actually turns out to be one of the first illusions that humans can comprehend. And they said, you know, magicians don't do magic for kids under the age of 5. And I'm a mother of a toddler, so I completely understood that. Kids under the age of 5 are insane. And they said, no, it's not for that reason. From the moment that you're born up until age 5, you are making sense of the world. And the way that you do that is you look around and you collect different data points of how the world works. You're constructing your reality. At the age of 5 and not before, you start to have enough data points that you can start to make relationships and set up expectation. So at 5, when the magician shows you a balloon and needle, you look and you say, oh, I know what's going to happen, right? And you get filled with that excitement and that anticipation. So then, when the magician does this, puts the needle through the balloon and it doesn't explode, your brain explodes, right? Because they've completely violated your expectation. The magician said, what's interesting about this illusion is thinking about how much horsepower it took for us to get to the point where we could even just comprehend the balloon and needle trick. It took 5 years, right? And they said, adult audiences aren't that much different than kid audiences. They're just on the other side of the spectrum. So instead of not having enough data points, adults have too many data points. So the job of the magician for an adult audience is to help us access those data points really quickly so that we can set up the proper expectation for what the trick is supposed to reveal, so then they can go ahead and violate it, right? So this becomes sort of our first high-level insight, right? We need to see the emotional expectation for the audience. Our unconscious mind not only loves it, but it needs it. This is a quote that I heard again and again. Confusion is not magic. It was said by Di Vernon, who's a legend in the magic community. He was an up-close magician. He got his technique by following card sharps around the country. They lovingly call him the professor because he's said to be one of the few that actually fooled Houdini. And Vernon said, the key to magic is making the audience feel like the trick was fair. If you build an illusion around confusion, you're just going to leave the audience in a confused state. So instead, you want to pull in the audience's attention by making them feel like an active participant in the magic, right? You want to have them follow along and feel like they're seeing every move that you're making. So then, when you're successful at tricking them, they walk away with that sensation of wonder and delight, right? And magicians have also learned over the years that if your brain is following along with the action, your brain will try to take shortcuts. And magicians have learned how to capitalize on that. So I want to try something with you. This is an illusion that comes from a book called Flights of Mind. I highly recommend it. I'm going to make one of these cards disappear with your help. So what I need you all to do, I need you to focus in on one of the cards up here on the slide, okay? So everybody pick a card and picture it, and then I'm going to make it disappear. Okay, you have your card? Okay. So now I need you to picture it. Send your mental waves to me. Okay, you've got it? You guys need to send it a little harder over here. Okay. I'm going to make it disappear. Whose card is still on the slide? Raise your hand. I'm so glad you guys are all honest. Because I changed all the cards! So, what magicians have learned that not only is your brain really bad at multitasking, it hates it. So if the magician gives your brain a direction like pick a card, your brain goes, fantastic, I can do that, I'm going to do that. And so your brain works at it and it focuses in on the card. And while your brain is happily focusing in on the card, the magician can do whatever they want. So in this case, the magician just changes all the cards. And your brain never notices. This technique is called intentional blindness effect. And there's another really great example of it I want to show you. Okay, so the original test was done in 1999 by 2 cognitive psychologists. This is actually a copy of the test that's used in a commercial, and I just present it because the video is a little higher quality. Let's take a look and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
That's brilliant, right? So did you guys see the bear? Did anyone see the bear and the baskets at the same time? Yeah. So what they say is, in most cases, people miss the bear completely. But if you see the bear and the basket at the same time, your likelihood of hitting accurately a count for the passing is really low. So I see both, but I can never get the counting correctly. What's really fascinating, though, and I love, is that there was a big question hanging over this. Do we not see the bear because our eye just isn't hitting the bear in the frame because we're following the basketball? And so in 2006, they went back and revisited the test again, this time with eye tracking software. And what they found is people who claimed to not see the bear, their eye was landing on the bear during the whole experience. So what that shows is that, out of mind, out of sight, right? They had no way to anticipate seeing the bear, so perceptually they didn't process the bear when they saw it. This is pretty big. So this is our next big insight. We have to prime the gaze for the audience. The audience can't see a story world that we create for them if they can't anticipate it, right? I'm going to bring back Professor Di Vernon. A lot of the magic that we experience today comes from his philosophies, and he is one of the magicians that said to the other magicians, look, we have to stop pointing. In early magic, they did a lot of this and a lot of that, And he said, it's annoying for the audience. No one likes to be told where to look. And because it's unnatural, it sort of pushes the audience out of the experience because they're thinking, why are you acting so weird? So I'm paraphrasing. Anyways, he said, let's try to figure out some other ways to guide the eye naturally. And we thought that that's really interesting because one of the complaints that we hear with VR right now is, and I think we can't blame the content creators. They don't have a lot of tools right now. So they're sort of leaning on tools that they can use. So they use a lot of title cards. They'll use a lot of sounds to activate the audience. But again, it's sort of unnatural, and we've heard complaints from the audience that it sort of pushes them out of the experience. They're suddenly aware that they're in a created world. So when they talked about what they use, they said, we use the gaze. And we talked about the gaze because eye contact is a big issue in VR. And they said, no, we don't use this type of gaze. We rarely use eye contact, direct eye contact. And the reason is, when we were all roaming the jungle and wandering around, we quickly learned that if someone was staring at us for a long time, it usually was a bad sign. It probably meant that we were going to get our tools stolen or that we were going to get jumped. The scenario rarely ended well, right? So they said, if we stare at our audience, they'll get really tense and uneasy. So we have to use other techniques. So they started to use something called joint attention. And joint attention is the reason why when we're walking down the street and we see people looking up at a tall building or the sky, that we have to look up too. And again, it goes back to when we were in the jungle. If we didn't look where others were looking, a rock could fall on our head and kill us. So we quickly learned, okay, we gotta look where other people are looking. This is an illusion called the duck trick, and what happens is they let loose on the stage a bunch of ducks. But then suddenly they disappear, and there's no trap door and there's no curtain. And I do know how this trick works. And maybe after a few drinks tonight, I will tell you, but I'm not going to tell you right now. But I will tell you that all the magic comes from the assistant's gaze. And what's interesting is when I thought of as magician's assistants before, I always thought that they were just there to help the magician make sure the show goes all right, make sure that the audience gets on stage. And the magicians said to me, oh no, they're like a big pointer stick. The magician's assistant's job is to look where the magician wants you to look. So here's another example of it. This is a diagram from a book called Magic and Showmanship, and you can see each blocking is all about where the assistant should be looking at the magician, and that's to guide the eye of the audience. So this could be really helpful in terms of VR. Maybe we need to start thinking about the blocking of the characters as a way to guide the eye of the audience. Another tool that they use is patter. This is Apollo Robbins. He's a famous pickpocket. And he uses patter, which is vocal prompts and touch to guide and divide your attention. So he touches and talks to you, and then he steals your money and does other really cool things to you. This is from his TED Talk. What we thought was fascinating, though, was when Peter Samuelson brought in this illusion called the Phoenix to show us. And the basic mechanics of the Phoenix, you've probably seen it, is a napkin that's perfect, gets burnt up, destroyed, and then it's restored to its original state. And what we love about this trick is that it works up close between two people, it works in a nightclub, and it can also work in an amphitheater. That's really compelling, right? It can work at these very disparate spaces. And that's really interesting for VR because right now, especially for live action VR, there's a little hiccup with the camera. You know, the audience has to be somewhat distanced from the action because if the camera gets too close, the physics start to break down and the image becomes a little bit blurry. That's probably changing as we speak, but right now it's a little bit of an issue. The audience often says, you know, I feel removed from the action. I wish I could be closer to the characters. But this illusion manages to get the audience to feel like they're right next to the magic, even if they're in the nosebleed seats of an amphitheater. So we were really compelled. How did they do that? And Peter said the key is combining patter with metaphor. So the illusion is called the Phoenix, and that immediately prompts this idea of the myth of the Phoenix, right? So even if you don't know the complete myth, you probably know key aspects of it, right? It's a bird that flies too close to the sun, burns up, but from the ashes is resurrected. Peter banks on that. He banks on the fact that as soon as your brain hears the Phoenix, it's going to start recalling the myth. So all he has to do is create small little visual prompts to activate your mind's eye to see the illusion, right? So his first step is to fold the napkin into a bird. And then he waves that around the room. And your mind's eye goes, bird, got it, I'm on the right track. And then he lights the napkin on fire. Now, if you're up close, you get to see the flame. But even if you're in amphitheater, you can see the smoke rising. And so again, your brain is satisfied. You're like, okay, we've got the fire. And then when he restores the napkin, it's a white napkin, and he just waves it around the room, and your mind's eye says, great, I saw it. It's seen the whole illusion, even if it isn't that close to Peter. So this is important. We feel like we need to amplify the wonder. The audience has the capability of getting themselves close to the action. We just need to help them find the key moments to bring them there. All right. So we are developing these into tools, along with some other insights that we've learned from the magicians. I really love this topic space, so if you have any questions about VR and how it could be better, please come up and approach me. Thank you very much for having me.